They've chosen to harm American national security, impeding access to the abundant critical minerals, energy, building materials, and fertilizers that we have and that the United States needs to grow and prosper. They've chosen to launch a trade war that will, first and foremost, harm American families. They've chosen to sabotage their own agenda that was supposed to usher in a new golden age for the United States. And they've chosen to undermine the incredible work we've done together to tackle the scourge that is fentanyl, a drug that must be wiped from the face of the earth. So on that point, let me be crystal clear. There is absolutely no justification or need whatsoever for these tariffs today. Now, the legal pretext your government is using to bring in these tariffs is that Canada is apparently unwilling to help in the fight against illegal fentanyl. Well, that is totally false. Let's look at the facts. Our border is already safe and secure. Far less than 1% of fentanyl flows and less than 1% of illegal crossings into the United States comes from Canada. But we acted because we know we can always do better. We responded to concerns, including from the President, by implementing an ambitious $1.3 billion border plan. A border plan that includes generational investments in new AI and imaging tools to stop the flow of fentanyl in its tracks, stronger coordination and information sharing with American agencies, along with the deployment of drones, helicopters, and additional personnel to keep our border secure. Now, a month ago, as part of an agreement with the United States that paused the tariffs, we made further commitments. We appointed Kevin Brasseau as our fentanyl czar, a man who dedicated his multi-decade career in law enforcement to combating organized crime networks and drug trafficking. We designated 7 drug cartels, sick, evil groups who cynically profit off the pain and suffering of people on both sides of the border, as the terrorist organizations that they are. And just yesterday, we launched a new joint operations partnership supported by a $200 million investment between Canada's security and law enforcement agencies, a partnership that will enhance the coordination of information and intelligence in order to thwart criminal gangs involved in the illegal fentanyl trade. And critically, our actions are working. As the U.S. Customs and Border Protection just acknowledged, there was a 97% drop in fentanyl seizures from January compared to December, to a near zero low of less than half an ounce seized in January, even with all the further enforcements and actions we've taken at the borders. In sum, we stepped up. We engaged closely and constructively with the President and his administration. We did everything we promised. We stuck to our word. And we did it because we believe in working together to protect our citizens. Now I want to speak directly to one specific American, Donald. In the over 8 years you and I have worked together, we've done big things. We signed a historic deal that has created record jobs and growth in both of our countries. We've done big things together on the world stage, as Canada and the US have done together for decades, for generations. And now we should be working together to ensure even greater prosperity for North Americans in a very uncertain and challenging world. Now, it's not in my habit to agree with the Wall Street Journal. But Donald, they point out that even though you're a very smart guy, this is a very dumb thing to do. We two friends fighting is exactly what our opponents around the world want to see. And now, to my fellow Canadians, I won't sugarcoat it. This is going to be tough, even though we're all going to pull together, because that's what we do. We will use every tool at our disposal so Canadian workers and businesses can weather this storm. From expanding EI benefits and making them more flexible to providing direct supports to businesses, we will be there as needed to help. But Canada, make no mistake, no matter how long this lasts, no matter what the cost, the federal government and other orders of government will be there for you. We will defend Canadian jobs. We will take measures to prevent predatory behavior that threatens Canadian companies because of the impacts of this trade war, leaving them open to takeovers. We will relentlessly fight to protect our economy. We will stand up for Canadians every single second of every single day because this country is worth fighting for. Les derniers mois ont été stressants et honnêtement épuisants
and really tiring for all of us,
je crois qu'on peut
but I think
être rassuré par
we can be
l'incroyable solidarité.
by the incredible solidarity.
The Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, I should mention the outgoing Prime Minister. At the end of the month, they'll start the process to replace him. He has just made this personal with President Trump. He didn't acknowledge his title as President of the United States. He called him Donald more than once. He said, this is a very, well, he said, you are a very smart person, but this is a dumb thing to do, paraphrasing that first part. We two friends fighting. And then he made the point that the world is watching and that this fight between him and who he called Donald is not good. Now, we are fortunate because while she walked away for just a moment dealing with this kind of thing at the State Department, we have back now State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce. Tammy, what is this going on? Is Canada already feeling this? Are we already feeling this? I'm watching the Dow. We are a little bit.
Well, look, we know that President Trump is a man who makes deals. We know that there are results to the choices he makes. Clearly, this needed to happen. I don't know when it comes to the Prime Minister's attitude about how this was a dumb thing when he also announces that they now have to have a fentanyl czar and they're focusing on the border and they're actually taking actions that deal with a major problem that our nation has faced as a result of fentanyl coming over that border. And his actions clearly indicate that that was something that needed to be addressed. So for both Canadians and the American people, this is important, and it also shows, certainly for the United States, a nation that is back, that we are focusing on the details of the lives of regular people that are impacted here. Remember, in the first term, he really talked about the forgotten man and woman. And this is part and parcel of that dynamic. The president is not afraid to do what is necessary. He knows the American people understand because he is a great communicator. You're going to hear more of that transparency tonight. But we also have in Marco Rubio, via the president's inspired choice, a diplomat who understands why this is occurring, who agrees with the nature of what needs to happen, and is the person who goes and talks face to face with our allies and our partners who have experienced years under the Biden administration without any real need to address any problems. But America is back, and that means we are partners now that must be taken seriously. And I think that it's unfortunate, but he is leaving, for him to be taking the attitude he has taken toward the president. There's a you know, respect is important, as of course President Zelensky learned. The issue of respect is important on the world stage. And if the Prime Minister was concerned about what our enemies are seeing it's ironic that he is saying that at a press conference. But we all have a different way of adjusting. But not just the Americans will benefit from this in the long run, which is why it's occurring. And frankly, so will the Canadians. It's a time when we look at what has perhaps gone wrong, what needs to be fixed, and we have a leader and certainly an American administration that understands all of those aspects and understands the vision and the impact of President Trump's actions.
Look, I looked down, I was taking a few notes as he was talking, and you really touched on something. He basically has nothing to lose, Justin Trudeau, because this is not the play of a winner. Calling the president of the United States by his first name and likening them like they're the same at this point. He's got nothing to lose, Trudeau.
Well, this is about, for him, perhaps personality. He's been the prime minister for a while. He was elected in, right? The Canadian people make their choices about who they want to be leading their nation. But the world has changed, and it has changed based on America being back. It is a renewal of the American dream, which is what the theme will be at tonight's speech. But part of that renewal is reinforcing our relationships. Look, sometimes you have to have difficult conversations with your friends because something's going wrong or you want to be able to help. And this is the nature of our own neighbors and friends, whether it is in South and Central America and reaffirming those relationships, or certainly to the north of us with Canada.
We're going to listen in one more time. Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, was just asked, what do you want to say to President Trump?
Of working together to take on the world at this time. The facts show very clearly that in terms of taking action on fentanyl, we are doing everything that is necessary, and not just for the United States, for ourselves as well, as Canadians are suffering as well from the scourge that is illegal fentanyl. We have laid out extensive plans, actions, cooperations, including as recently as the past days in Washington, and they have always been very well received. And the numbers bear that out. I think in what President Trump said yesterday, that there is nothing Canada or Mexico can do to avoid these tariffs, underlines very clearly what I think a lot of us have suspected for a long time, that these tariffs are not specifically about fentanyl, even though that is the legal justification he must use to actually move forward with these tariffs.
Monsieur Trudeau, en français, à part l'allocution que vous avez eue envers Monsieur Trump, lui avez-vous parlé au cours des derniers jours, des dernières heures?
Have you talked to
Non.
Mr.
Je
Trump
me suis mis
besides
à sa
that
disposition
conversation
pour parler
you
pendant les
days
derniers
ago?
jours, comme on avait fait il y a 30 jours. J'espère lui parler dans
I
les
hope
jours à venir.
you
Je suis toujours
talk
ouvert pour
to him in the future.
You mentioned this
My
off the
door is
top.
open.
You're seeing the United States seemingly moving closer.
All right, so through all that translation, I want to bring back the State Department spokesperson, Tammy Bruce. So they were translating, and he was asked the question, have you spoken to Trump since your last conversation that we all know about and have reported on? And you heard him say the door is always open. Wow. OK, so he wants our president, whom he can't even call by his last name with his title, to call him up. Look, all I can think of is this. That day, and it happened during this hour, that day that they kicked him out, and we knew that once they found a replacement, he would be gone. I can't imagine with the president saying to him, 51st state, Canada? That's what he's focused on. It feels personal. This doesn't help Canadians.
And well, it doesn't. And yet he also admitted that the fentanyl situation is a scourge and that they've taken more actions, as we had talked about earlier, but there he repeated that, and then dismissed President Trump's actions on tariffs as a legal mechanism. You see, Canadians and Americans can see the difference in if what someone is saying is really transparent, if it is personal or if it's about them. I think President Trump, people have gotten used to hearing from a man who genuinely is doing things for the sake of the American people, of his people. And I think around the world, it has been refreshing. And it's unfortunate, but, you know, politicians sometimes have to say certain things. But in this case, we are hearing about the importance and the results that Prime Minister Trudeau has implemented only as a result of the tariffs that the United States has now implemented via President Trump. It is a scourge. It does destroy Canadian lives. It destroys American lives. And that's the end result, and that's what the citizens of both of these countries care about.
I get it. Look, at the State Department right now, to have you on is really important at this moment, because this is what you in part are working on today, and all of that filters into your day. We get first reaction from you, Tammy Bruce, and we are appreciative.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.